This is workshop number 11, Higher Education Sustainability, Priorities, Programs, Partnerships, and Practices in Climate Change and Resilience. This is a 1.5-hour session, so we will conclude at 10:30 a.m. If you're looking for a different workshop in the wrong place, this is your time to relocate. With that, please welcome our presenters.
Thank you, Arden. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. My name is Jean Ponzi. I'm the Green Resources Manager for the Earth Place Center, which is the Sustainability Division of Missouri Botanical Garden here in St. Louis. And it's my pleasure to get to moderate this session in partnership with Arden. We are going to have 30 minutes to hear from our first group, the Environmental Resilience Center from Indiana University, and 30 minutes to hear from the St. Louis Higher Education Sustainability Consortium, and then 30 minutes for dialogue and discussion. So I would like to ask you please to enter your questions in the Whova app, and Arden will be monitoring them, or keep track of your questions, and in the last 30 minutes, we will moderate that discussion. You're going to hear from really different and complementary higher education organizations here this morning. And I hope that what you will be able to take away is some of the how, perhaps some of the what, and certainly we're all very aware of the why, or we wouldn't be here, we'd be shocked. So on that note, the Environmental Resilience Center at Indiana University, Gabe Filippelli, will you please introduce your presenters?
Happy to, and thank you, Jean. You probably saw me a little bit last night, but at the IU Environmental Resilience Institute, we've been trying to apply the best science we can to implement just, equitable, and sustainable change for communities and businesses and nonprofits. And so we're going to present in an overview our programs. You're welcome also to look at eri.iu.edu, where you'll see all of these programs as well. And we have, this is my only time standing up in front of you, so you'll be very happy because we're going to actually have real experts here. Sarah Mincy, Bill Brown, and Tress Rowe, who are going to share about our program. If the Whova app is weird, you can also just jot down your questions and you can open it up afterwards. So without further ado, Sarah.
Thank you, Gabe. Welcome, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today to tell you a little bit more about the Environmental Resilience Institute. And in particular, today we're going to be focusing on a particular program at ERI called the McKinney Midwest Climate Project. So to start, I want to just get our mission out there. The Environmental Resilience Institute co-creates environmental resilience and climate solutions through integrated research, education, and community. And you will notice that the image up here shows this nicely, but I actually just stole this from Indiana University Strategic Planning Process, in which we actually have 3 pillars, and those are transformative research, student success, and service to the state. And so it's really nice to have that becoming the strategic plan pillars and us fitting so well into that for climate resilience for the state of Indiana. So ERI has been around since 2017. We got started out of what I think of as kind of a higher education trend, Grand Challenges program. Some of you may have experienced this, right? Where your university, puts out call for researchers to come together to address societal challenges. We had 3 grand challenges that were awarded over the last several years, and Prepared for Environmental Change was the 2nd grand challenge that won at Indiana University. And out of that proposal, the Environmental Resilience Institute was born. And ERI administered a large number of research grants. So we have on the right-hand side of the screen, a lot of the statistics that will show you the research success that came out of this grand challenge and out of the Institute. We hired lots of faculty. You can see 180 plus peer-reviewed publications. We brought in a lot of external funding. And so we, say 3 times the return on the investment that the university made in terms of research. But the really, really exciting part to me is how we've engaged students at ERI and served our community. So we're going to talk to you about programs that have done that, but just some quick statistics up here. You can see, lots of students served, and then a lot of our communities in terms of climate action planning, which is the focus of our service to the state. So there are sort of 4 areas then that I think that ERI is working in. our research helps us offer predictions and understanding about what Indiana is facing in terms of climate change impacts. We have effective communication strategies, everything from environmental reporters that have been placed at the Indianapolis Star. We also have a podcast called In This Climate. You should check it out. It's really great. And then we have feasible solutions that come from our tools. We have a number of tools that communities can use to assess their risks and vulnerabilities, and then also to look at case studies that demonstrate how communities all across the state are developing resilience through climate projects. And then finally, implementation. And this is really where we're moving today. I'm going to talk to you about our implementation programs, the McKinney Midwest Climate Project. So the Climate Project is made up of two programs, the McKinney Climate Fellows and the Resilience Cohort Program. These two programs have been serving the entire state. You can see the little points here all across the state in terms of where our student fellows have been and the communities that we have served. And I'm going to give you just an overview of these right now. The McKinney Climate Fellows Program, we bring in graduate and undergraduate students from all across the university, not just the Bloomington campus, but our regional campuses as well, from all disciplines. They apply to become a McKinney Climate Fellow. In the meantime, we have taken applications from host organizations, nonprofits, businesses, and local governments who want to host a fellow. Those fellows then go out and work full-time in the summer, 40 hours a week for about 12 weeks. And increasingly, we're extending those fellowships through the academic year to serve sustainability and climate action projects. And the most significant pool of those students are working with our local governments, helping them to advance climate action planning. And that's happening through the Resilience Cohort. The Resilience Cohort is a program in which our team at ERI, made up of experts who are doing who are experts in climate action planning, along with technical consultants, are working alongside a cohort of local governments, cities, towns, county governments, who want to do either assessment of their risks and vulnerabilities, climate action planning, or implementation of plan projects. And we're working alongside them with our fellows. So this essentially is the combination of those two things. So the McKinney Climate Fellows Program, you can see some nice quotes up here from some of the recent fellows. Benjamin at the top said the Fellows Program is a great opportunity to apply the skills that you're learning in his school, is O'Neill, the O'Neill School of Public and Environmental Affairs, to an actual position. The student below says, what's really great about the program is they really try to tailor the experience towards what you're doing as a student. So this has become such a wonderful thing within the university to demonstrate a co-curricular experience that's really impactful on the students. But for our communities, it builds the host organization's capacity, right? And we're, again, serving government, private, and nonprofit hosts. And we've had more than 160 fellowships completed. This coming year, we'll have another close to 40 fellows. So we'll be at about 200 fellows over the past 5 years. So a really big success. I'm going to turn it over now to Therese, who's going to talk a little bit more. Oh, sorry, Bill, sorry, I mixed it up. Bill's going to talk about the McKinney Climate Fellows Program and where the origin of the program and how it's developed over time and how we're serving the communities, but also serving a new program at ERI. I almost missed that. Sorry.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you all for finding this room. I think that demonstrates your spatial intelligence. Finding this place took me a while. So I started my journey with IU sustainability 14 years ago. I was the first sustainability director. I took a flying leap from public architecture to the world of sustainability in higher education. And we realized pretty early on that this was a very complex topic because it involved the three pillars that the university felt were important, but also the discussion among universities about what was important in higher education sustainability. So you looked at the operations of the university, and you looked at academics, research, and teaching, and then how do we engage with the community. And our secret weapon was half of our budget, more than half of our budget, was to fund internships. And that turned out to be an amazing workforce. We only had 2 full-time staff, and we had about 20 interns at a time, usually. And they worked with 8 working groups across all of the realms of the university. Each working group had a faculty co-chair and a staff co-chair. So in energy, for example, you had the energy manager and a faculty member who had some expertise in energy, and then you had a group of volunteers, and that each of those groups was led by that student intern. And then we had some extra student interns to do research and special projects and spin up new programs all the time. What we found was this was a very great educational experience for the students. They got some experience leading a group and collaboration experience, and then dealing with real problems on the ground at a major university. So we decided that this community engagement piece was one that we weren't touching, weren't getting the students off campus and engaging in communities outside of the university. We looked at the Epic N program. Any of you have an Epic N program? So you know what that's about, where typically you have classes engaging with a major metropolitan area, and they have some capacity, they can engage with the students. We tried to spin off a program called Sustaining Improvement Communities that works with rural communities. And it's a whole different challenge because they don't really have the capacity to deal with a group of classes descending on them. And we typically did this one county at the time. This is in Lawrence County. That's the mayor of Bedford, turned around trying to fill out the form as fast as she could because she had all these needs in her community that she wanted IU faculty and classes to collaborate with her on. I was teaching a class in sustainable communities, for example. She wanted a complete streets policy for Bedford. The class did the research about what's going on across the country, developed a complete streets policy, which was adopted by their city council. And this program, by the way, is now part of the Center for Rural Engagement. And Jane Rogan there, she has developed this to the point where it's a national model for how you do this with rural communities. And then we had another idea where we were talking to the McKinney Family Foundation, and we said that, you know, wouldn't it be interesting if we had an Indiana Sustainability Development Program where we're getting students out with nonprofits, government, and corporate entities that wanted to explore sustainability, do sustainability planning, and maybe they didn't have the capacity or the knowledge, and they needed a little help. So we did a boot camp for carefully chosen students and trained them in sustainability, made sure they had the basics of sustainability knowledge. And then we sent them out into the field with their partners. We were funded through the McKinney Family Foundation to give them a stipend, which helped communities that really didn't have the money to hire an intern to have an intern, which we call them externs because we had interns and externs. And what happened over time is we developed these relationships all over the state with entities, communities, corporations, nonprofits. Some of these are double dippers where they kept coming back for more. Others are new to the program each year. And since this program was started, it moved into the Environmental Resilience Institute. Janet McCabe thought this might be a good way to get climate action plans done for local governments. And turned out that was a great idea. And the McKinney Family Foundation loved that idea. And so that has evolved. ISDP is now the McKinney Climate Fellows program. And you know what we've learned over the years is that this is great for keeping students in the state, and it develops the workforce, the sustainability workforce in Indiana, which is dearly needed in Indiana. And it can stimulate economic development and expanded capacity of those communities. And I think you'll see that many of our alumni are also working in these communities as full-time sustainability professionals. We have training for the next generation of workers. Rural impact is an important concept here in Indiana, and still is, and I'll show you what we're working on next in that regard. And then just getting more acceptance throughout Indiana for the whole idea of resilience and mitigation of climate change and adaptation to climate change. And then this gives students agency. They have some sense of urgency and despair and agency secured for that. And so they find this to be an experience that helps them psychologically as well as professionally. To give you an example, Lauren Travis was in the Sustaining Hoosier Communities program as a member of my class, and she was a natural leader of her class group. And then she was in the first cohort of the Indiana Sustainability Development Program. Then she was in the McKinney Midwest Climate Project Resilience cohort as the assistant director for sustainability for the city of Bloomington, where the sustainability budget went from $50,000 a year to $2 million a year. One of the successes here is that she was from the state of Washington, and she was planning to go back to the state of Washington as soon as she graduated. We captured her for a few key years. Now she's gone back to the state of Washington, drawn by family ties, but we got great benefit from her being here, being with us in Indiana for a while.
I was applying to McKinney Fellows and scrolling through all the different options of people you could work for, and as I'm scrolling through, I'm like, Indianapolis Motor Speedway. I saw that was an option and they want to do sustainability, and what an opportunity. People should do the McKinney Fellowship so that they can apply the skills they're learning in their classroom. Also learn skills in the real world that you can bring back to the classroom and share with the people you know. Along the way, you get to benefit a community. You get to be passionate, and you get to be creative, and you get to do these projects that are going to make a difference. All meanwhile, creating connections with other McKinney students and McKinney alum. So it's really just a holistic experience.
So what would a climate neutral speedway look like? The next step is they're working on hybrid engines. So you can see that evolving. I met this professor Dalak, who unfortunately is not here today because he's suffering from COVID, but he did research on communities throughout Indiana and did surveys about their capacity and what would prevent them from taking advantage of all this federal grant money that's starting to flow through the system. And what he found was the top two responses were financial resources and not enough staff. So there was an idea that was born, and by the way, I've been at the Environmental Resilience Institute for 5 weeks. So my history with the Environmental Resilience Institute is very short, but this is a program that we're working on now called the Indiana Resilience Funding Hub, where we hope to answer those two needs: money and staffing. If you don't have enough staffing, you can't get access to the money. And so we want to help people get access to the grant funding, and we have some grant money ourselves to fund this program and to hire a grant consultant. And then we're going to assign 4 McKinney Climate Fellows to communities to help them get over the hump. This is a pilot project where our goal was to do 5 to 8 grants submitted before the end of the year. And hopefully that will work well, and we'll get more funding to keep doing this, because we think this is a 3 to 5 year period where people are going to be trying to access this grant money. And then a second goal is to help up to 12 communities in other ways, with webinars, with information sources, with news and resources that they can access to help them with this opportunity and challenge. And then you can see that we're using the 3 pillars again. The student engagement piece is the McKinney Climate Fellows, who will be learning how to do grant writing and grant administration. We're doing service to Indiana through technical support for proposal writing. And then we're going to be borrowing the expertise of some of our faculty, like Karen Dalak, to help move through this process and help people fill out the grant applications. So stay tuned. This just started. We just announced it last week. As Sarah likes to say, we are building the plane as we're flying it, which I'm very comfortable with that. Actually, it feels right to me. So I will turn it over to Rez.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm gonna.
Oh,
just give it.
sorry,
Well, introduction.
Let me get this right.
But yeah, I know. So the resilience cohort, I really did already give you sort of the overview of that. Basically, this is acceleration for local governments in climate action, right? We serve the nonprofits and we serve the business community, but this is a particular program for our local governments. They're in a peer network where we have offered them technical assistance and coaching. I talked through the fact that we do assessment of risks and vulnerabilities, planning, and then implementation. And again, integrating the student experience and the community need here is critical through the McKinney Climate Fellows. Thank you.
So when ERI was new, staff traveled the state and talked to local government leaders about what their barriers were. And you won't be surprised that staffing and funding were definitely high on that list. But what their barriers were for preparing for climate change. And, you know, there were three kind of categories: political barriers in Indiana, technical challenges, and staffing. And really at the time, there was minimal legislation or state programming. And there were concerns about slow federal progress that just kind of left a vacuum for the local government sector trying to fill and be leaders in their community, in the private and nonprofit sectors in their own communities. And then most cities didn't have at the time dedicated sustainability or climate staff, although that has changed in part to the McKinney Climate Fellows program. And they weren't participating in professional or technical networks, so they were just really unsupported in their efforts to prepare for climate change in Indiana. And then of course, staff and funding limitations. So IU thought that they could be, as a trusted convener, fill that gap in Indiana and take some of the political nature of the conversation out. We've had a number of pretty impactful climate events across the state, as well as some new and fresh science that was well publicized that really made it possible to understand how local governments were going to be impacted in Indiana in a way. It made it tangible in a way that it really hadn't been before in our isolated, cozy Midwestern non-coastal environment. We also saw an opportunity for ERI to identify the best expertise, to leverage our relationships to find consulting partners with the technical skills that were needed across several communities, so we could leverage that and serve several communities at once. We were able to develop the funding support to minimize the financial investment needed for communities, and through the McKinney Climate Fellows program, provide dedicated staff capacity with full-time student support over the summer. So the cohort model really was the solution, because we wanted to just simplify and distill these common sustainability planning processes to provide basic level of support to every community, and centralize that training and provide these resources to tackle these three kind of challenge categories. The goal really for me as a local government practitioner at the time was to bypass kind of the programmatic confusion, we're just getting started, we don't know what to do, we don't know who can help us, bypass that and move just as quickly as we could to implementation. So I want to share with you two cohort examples. These are both from last summer where we ran dual cohorts. And Sarah mentioned the 3 phases of the assess, the plan, to implement 3 phases of cohort work. And so the climate action planning cohort was really working in the plan phase. Okay, and their goal was to help communities. This cohort's plan was to help communities write an action plan to provide them with the strategic framework and the political buy-in to start investing in specific projects or activities. Several of our communities were repeat cohort participants, and so they were able to build on their greenhouse gas inventory that they had developed with ERI in an earlier cohort. So they had data to drive their climate action plan development in that assess phase. They did stakeholder and public engagement that we supported, and often they were able to get the adoption of their final plans by City Council. We partnered with ICLEI, Sustainability for Local Governments, to provide the climate action plan training and the plan template to make it really streamlined and easy for communities to complete. And then one of the things that we were really excited about this last summer was moving towards regional collaboration to allow smaller communities to work together to reach a scale that they wouldn't have been able to reach otherwise. And then our urban green infrastructure cohort, we partnered with Davey Tree for some really technical assistance and analysis, really trying to get at the implementation. So for many, this work supported actions that were already in their existing climate action plans in their communities. And they were able to assess tree canopy coverage as well as other factors in their communities, such as urban heat island effects, land coverage, soil erosion, and overlap that with social equity criteria with the goal of figuring out where tree plantings would have the greatest impact. Two great outcomes from last summer's cohort. One of our fellows used the results of their assessment to win a grant for their community to provide more tree planting dollars. And another community completed a connectivity study of their ecology and the habitat in their community. So across the state, we've had 83 participants, which includes the 7 that we expect this summer. And several repeat participants moving through this assess, plan, implement phases. And we do have some improvements that we have planned, more time to complete the fellowships or extending through the school year, focusing on equity by offering translation services and equity coaching for communities, and then the regional collaborations that I mentioned. And lots of benefits for communities. Communities are being more prepared for state and federal climate action. They're growing their numbers of sustainability staff, as Bill mentioned, and they're developing a community of practice and network that they know they can rely on within the state that understands the state constraints. They're also gathering a lot of really important data. They're assessing their vulnerabilities to climate change, their core systems, their social and economic and operational systems. And they're benchmarking their major emission sources so that they can track that over time and create climate action plans around that. And they're definitely increasing their understanding of equity and environmental justice in ways that they maybe hadn't tackled as a community before. Because ERI stays connected to the community needs, we're able to identify additional research and funding opportunities that make it really enriching for ERI, but also improve the community practice around the state. And this is all kind of adding up to a cultural shift where this isn't so much of a unwelcome conversation. People feel supported. Sustainability practitioners in many of the major cities in Indiana exist where they weren't before. And that network and that level of support and depoliticizing the conversation by bringing data and funding and support and kind of a common frame of reference has been really, I think, shifting the conversation in the last several years. That's it for me. Yeah.
So I'll just wrap us up with a few ideas about our Princeton success. Can I ask quickly, how many of you are associated with higher education? Okay, so a lot of you. I gave a similar talk where I had secrets to success that, and I was thinking of a broader audience than we have here. This is really thinking about if you're in higher education or associated with it, what are the secrets to success there, right? So one of them is to create a pipeline for recruitment for programs like this. So I think you heard Bill, talking about the history of the different programs. Many of those programs still exist. There are others that we haven't talked about. We have a sustainability research experience for freshmen who may come to IU, the Sustain IU internships, which keep students doing this kind of operational work with the campus on campus as a stepping stone to then take them out into the world to work with external partners. So there's a lot of other co-curricular programs that are stepping stones to help lead them to the McKinney Climate Fellowship. And stepping stone programs for the resilience cohort communities as well. The pillar of what ERI does in terms of communications, I mentioned our climate podcast and other programs we have. One of those is we put on a series of webinars for local governments to help inform them and to listen to them. And those webinars are a way that it's simple way for them to start to connect with DRI and then learn about the FOWORK program and eventually engage in that. I think it's important also to communicate the co-benefits of students in these substantive roles often and to everyone, right? So integrating students and educational outcomes into climate work is a bonus, right? When you're writing a grant proposal, you do climate work, but you can also say you're training the future workforce in that. That is impactful. And I think that's made all the difference with the McKinney Family Foundation because they want to be a part of supporting students developing into the sustainability professionals that will actually change the state. There are strong outcomes for communities that we've been talking about here today, increasing their capacity through the students, but also another note, students help kind of throw out the politics around sustainability and climate work, right? When you bring in a young, fresh person to a community where it might have been very political, that seems to kind of fall away because people are interested in helping train the student, and the student can really make a difference in the community that way. And then of course, you know, this students are attracted to and prepared for green careers. This is something that we keep talking about as well. And that really helps engage students in the program. Finally, leveraging resources and growing them. So we would say use multiple funding sources for something like this. That's been really pivotal for us. It's not just the McKinney Family Foundation. We have multiple other grant sources. The schools at the university contribute because we're giving their students really good experiences. And then the communities contribute as well. The fellowships that we're offering to graduate students are $6,000 for a summer, but the community gives a couple thousand for that. The rest of it is from our grants. So the community has skin in the game in that way, right? So that they're really taking it seriously and investing in the student. Speak to the university mission, obviously is critical. Develop a relationship with funders who can evolve into bigger funders. And then you can think about even using student financial aid. That's not something we've done, but there are other programs we're utilizing the student financial aid for this kind of externship. So I hope you see the way that we're working through the McKinney, Midwest McKinney Climate Project to support Indiana and to support our students and to make the state greener. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Environmental Resilience Institute of Indiana University. Now we're going to have our St. Louis Higher Education Sustainability Consortium team move into that presentation spot. If you are using the Whova app and you would like to put your questions on the Whova app and you are a presenter and monitoring the Whova app, you are welcome to answer those questions directly in the app. We'll have another 30-minute presentation and then we'll have about 15 minutes for questions and discussion. And St. Louis team, I will give you a 10-minute warning as I did the Indiana team. Okay. Little commercial for this afternoon's mobile workshops. If you haven't signed up yet, Missouri Botanical Garden and the St. Louis Zoo are hosting a mobile workshop that will deal with biophilia, climate communications, green building, and other kinds of stuff. No Petunia, so sorry, maybe it is. Maggie McCoy of the St. Louis Higher Education Sustainability Consortium and the Earthway Center at Missouri Botanical Garden.
Excellent, thanks, Jean. And also thank you, Jean, for giving us our 10-minute warning at the end of this. We have plenty of time for questions. So again, my name is Maggie McCoy. I actually work at Missouri Botanical Garden in their Earthway Center, which is the sustainability division. So we're really lucky here in St. Louis and at the garden that we actually have a team of folks within the Botanical Garden that's dedicated to sustainability within the community. So part of my work there is working with higher education, and specifically the St. Louis Higher Education Sustainability Consortium. So today we're going to cover a little bit about how that consortium came about, what its structure is, and then hear from two folks, including Cassandra Hage, who is the Assistant Director in the Office of Sustainability here at Washington University, and then Katie Mike Smystrela, who's the, let's get it right, the Coordinator of Sustainability at University of Missouri St. Louis. So just, and Katie Mike actually was at the Botanical Garden when this program started. So if you have more in-depth questions about the history, she is the person to ask. But I'll go ahead and start with also a shout out to our sponsor for this group who helps to provide that grant funding for making this group work, which is our local solid waste management district and the Missouri Department of Natural Resources. So kind of what we are is that the St. Louis Higher Education Sustainability Consortium is really a group of campus sustainability champions from around the region who also work on sustainability initiatives with support from other nonprofits. So that includes Missouri Botanical Garden, but also our local U.S. Green Building Council chapter, which is the Missouri Gateway Green Building Council. So with the support from those folks, we help to bring forward a lot of campus sustainability initiatives, but sort of in work with each other. A little bit about how this came about. So, you know, in around the time of between like 2006 and 2009, there was a lot of folks within Earthway Center and also the U.S. Green Building Council who were interested on working on sustainability initiatives in the region, particularly within higher education. So at that time, there were things like a campus sustainability day hosted at local universities, waste audits held at several college campuses, and some other sustainability initiatives. And also like newsletters being sent out and some lunchtime workshops being held, but sort of trying to get a lot of this work going. There were a lot of sustainability initiatives at universities within St. Louis at the time, but it was really starting to get those to work together. And then sort of closer to getting into 2010, some sustainability champions from some local universities and these nonprofits started trying to formalize that relationship a little bit more. So trying to figure out how can we leverage sort of our joint work together to bring about more sustainability in the region, particularly within higher education. So with that in mind, that is sort of how the Higher Education Sustainability Consortium was born. So that was in 2010, and it's been going ever since, helping to serve local higher education institutions in terms of sharing resources and bringing those campus sustainability champions together. This is what I hope is the full list of people who've been here over the years, but if I leave anybody off, I apologize. I think one of the things that is unique about being in the Midwest is that in a lot of even small, mid-sized, and larger cities, you get a huge range of different types of universities. So in our particular group, you have private universities, public universities, urban universities, rural universities, and they're all within like an hour to an hour and a half drive of each other. So a lot of different audiences, a lot of different organizations with a lot of different sustainability needs, but all with those champions that really want to bring forward that work. And so most of the range of this is sort of from Missouri all the way through Lake Central and Southern Illinois. A lot of those higher education institutions are involved within this work. I think one of the things we learned from COVID is that having all of these virtual capabilities has really assisted a lot of our more rural partners in being able to attend a lot of this work. So kind of how this works, because I'm at the Garden and not in higher ed, is that a lot of this work is really pushed forward by these champions at these individual sort of campus communities and sort of their work. They are these sustainability professionals. I at the Earthway Center and then in some of these nonprofit roles really function in sort of this administrative capacity. So setting meetings, organizing folks, sort of bringing everybody together, hopefully at the same time, so that we can all get together and talk about the work that we're doing and sort of figure out what are the other needs of these campuses. So we do have a lot of programs that include things like workshops and lunch and learns or coffee talks, and I have some of those highlighted in a minute, that we invite lots of folks to from around the region who are in higher ed. And then we also have our steering committee, which typically has 1 or 2 representatives from the universities that are involved in the consortium, sort of coming together and helping to figure out what programming do we want to do coming up, what are sort of the initiatives, what are students asking for, where's our strategic plan at our university going, what kind of resources do we need, and seeing if we can help fulfill that need. So just some recent programs that we've done or been associated with. One of the ones that actually happened a couple of years ago, which was really fun, that was actually put on by our local transit organization, was sort of this college transit challenge, which was basically an initiative to help get students really interested in riding college transit. We had an event at one of the stations, and we were able to attend, and all the mascots from all the different universities were riding around on the train. So it was really interesting. It was kind of fun to bring all of those together. You know, we've had initiatives like with one of our local electronics recyclers on being able to talk through that process of doing those electronics recycling drives. And then just this past December, working with a local, like the Audubon Institute and the Lights Out Heartland Initiative, looking at how can universities participate in helping to protect migrating birds by making sure that they get their legs turned off during some of these migration seasons. And I know Washington University was a big proponent of that. And it's harder than you think to get legs turned off at universities. So being able to bring this kind of programming and share those resources and expertise is really important. Sometimes there's expertise outside of our region that we really want to seek out. So, you know, and within Washington University and also some of the expertise within the region a number of years ago, we talked about what does it mean to be carbon neutral on a college campus? You know, how do you measure that? What is the definition? How do we get these conversations going within our own universities? You know, after that conversation, a lot of people were looking at their strategic plans, but how do we make our strategic plans more equitable? So being able to bring in experts who are able to talk about incorporating Indigenous perspectives into strategic planning, and how do you really reach out to your local communities and engage stakeholders in a meaningful way. And then just our most recent one this past spring was looking at circular economies on campus. So how can we keep stuff rotating on campuses, from sort of big asset management software platforms to donating supplies, to even a student who is here at Washington University figuring out how can you distribute all that free food that's left over at the end of events with very hungry college students who want to eat it. So there's sort of like a big scale of different things that we do depending on the interests of the universities and trying to bring all those folks together. So with that said, I do want to hand it off to some of our university partners who are really the drivers of this work and our sustainability champions. So I'm going to hand it over to Cassie from WashU first.
Thanks for the overview, Maggie. It was kind of like going back through time, and I actually forgot about something. That was a really good program. Yeah, I'm here at Washington University in St. Louis, and I don't have any slides, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about our role in the program and the impact that the consortium has had on our work. So for me, we do have comparatively or relatively speaking, a larger team of sustainability that's actually grown over the last maybe 5 or 6 years since the coalition has been going. So it's been really great to be able to bring team members into this coalition and build relationships with other sustainability professionals who are working on similar challenges in regional context as we are. There's still plenty of differences between the different institutions, but that what I have found is that the level of depth that we're able to go to with our relationships provides a lot of value, whereas other coalitions like ASHE, for example, still value in its own right, but there's a lot of we haven't been able to build the same depth of relationships that we can go to when we're struggling with different challenges or something, for example, like that Heartland, if that's something like that comes up that we're learning about, we can really connect with others in that space to dig more into things that are very regionally relevant. So Maggie mentioned a huge list, and I wish I could say that all were like very engaged throughout. We've seen the fluctuation in engagement overall, but the core representatives are more centered around the St. Louis region, the bi-state region. And so that proximity has allowed for us to connect on things like Metro Transit and on initiatives that are, again, very region specific. The other thing that I'll mention is just the ability to be able to, in this field, it can often feel like you are, one of the only people working on this topic at your institution. And so I think for our team and for the team members in other institutions, this has been a way to bounce ideas off of one another, or just learn what others are doing to either leverage and be able to come back and say, I'm still doing this really cool program. Maybe we should be thinking about how we can do something like that in our own context and vice versa. So definitely leveraging. There's also been the universities can be difficult to navigate. And so this is one connection point where if we, for example, we had a request from our director of operations who wanted to talk to his peers in other institutions in this local area to try to coordinate on beverage pouring rights contracts, right? So that's something where, you never know who I know who the right person in my university would be to talk about this, but I would not have any idea where to start at UMSL or at Webster or, SLU. So being able to have kind of a point person at our partner or neighbor institutions to help us also navigate to make those connections for our colleagues throughout the university where those yeah, I'm sure that there are probably other things that we could go into in detail, but I think really just having the opportunity for shared learning opportunities as a very fast changing landscape. So when we hear or start to learn of time relevant things for us, the steering committee is able to act very nimbly and put together programming that we're all interested in diving more into, and then kind of capitalize on that energy spent. So if we're digging into an issue like circular economy, we can share what we're learning in that space and have the impact ripple out more than just our institution.
Hi there. So I would have to second that. That was a very nice walk through memory lane, since I've been there for all of it, actually. And so I've seen the ebb and flow, and I think I can just refer to some of Maggie's slides here to talk about some of that. When around that herding cat stage, if you recall, that's about when I transitioned to the University of Missouri St. Louis and the sustainability coordinator, because I really wanted to focus on one campus. And it's been interesting since then to watch one campus grow, but really we've grown because of the area that we're growing in. It's a great growing medium with the help of the Missouri Botanical Garden and other institutions to challenge us at UMSL for sure. And so when I look at some of these past programs, just even this one up here on in the middle there, the carbon neutrality, participating in that particular workshop reminded me, although I'd heard it before at the Earthway Center, that the greenest kilowatt is one that's been used, and challenged me to think about our climate action plan at UMSL in terms of reducing kilowatt usage as opposed to necessarily focusing on some of those big, sexy solar panels, which my state institution is not going to be putting up soon. So thinking about our planning in that way, I think I've always received a new perspective from the consortium, and it's nice. Looking at the circular economy session, knowing that a WashU student had created an app. Well, thinking about it in my own context, at my school, we didn't need to create an app. We could just use the tools that are already in place. Microsoft Teams is great for communicating. We have a few other communication tools that our students are already using, and getting the word out about free food is not hard. So that's something that we've literally taken in different ways, and it looks different on every campus. That's the beauty of it, really, when you think about it. Just like our mascots look very different. It's a very diverse landscape here in St. Louis amongst all of the institutions. And I think that actually challenges us to do better by the region. That image with the mascots up there, the climate, the transit campus college transit challenge is actually coming back. And so we're excited to start that next month, March 3rd. So if you're a student in the area, be sure to register and sign up. So one of our schools will get points for it. And that kind of friendly competition is a good thing, but it's also never felt like a competition. That's one of the best things about the consortium, is that everybody's always operated under the principle of a rising tide lifts all ships. And so it's not necessarily that we have to feel scarcity. That when we come together, we really do have an abundance, particularly an abundance of ideas. And so I think that's where I'll end on, unless there's more that I need to share about the University of Missouri St. Louis or any other institute.
I think we're good. We're going to start with questions.
Good. We have some really good
Close the channels.
and perhaps the Indiana team could come out. We have a couple of chairs there, and if you want to just be up here in the front of the room. We have questions for both from Anukuba for both of the teams. So the Indiana team, how did you get the initial funding from the university to launch the Environmental Resilience Initiative?
Well, that's something that Dave can help me answer. That was a part of this Grand Challenge program. I was at the Integrated Program in the Environment, which is focused on academic programs, but we have all the faculty from all the different disciplines at the Bloomington campus engaged. And so we developed a process where we had an online place where faculty could put up proposal ideas for this Grand Challenge program, and all different kinds of ideas came in, and we ended up having a charrette, and we pulled them all together into one proposal. And I think through that process, the proposal became very successful because we were engaging all these different groups. And then I don't know, David, you have more insight into why the university chose.
No, I think that's excellent. The university indicated that the president indicated he wanted 3 areas he wanted to focus on this Grand Challenges, and one of them being healthcare, precision health, another one being climate change. And I think the difference is we're in a funny system in the state of Indiana. We have 2 public university systems that are very big, IU and Purdue. Purdue basically owns us in terms of community engagement because they're the land grant institution. So they're in communities already. The IU president got mad about that and said, IU needs to have a presence on the ground. So our proposal, I think that spurred us to include that expressly in the proposal. It's a very non-academic thing, right? Yeah. To do that. Normally we just want to be in our labs and not be, messed around with, but it was a spur from the university as well.
And how did you say a little bit more about how you have connected the intern and the fellowship engagement to curriculum?
I can speak to that, but yeah. Okay. Well, it's interesting. We've naturally drawn from a lot of different programs that address the environment sustainability, but as I said, it's from all different disciplines. What we're doing now is, I think, the best tie to our academic programs. I'm working, and it's kind of a strategic thing. I'm working with several different schools to have the McKinney Climate Fellows program be a recruitment tool for them. So in an application, an applicant comes in that's really great, this graduate student who wants to come to O'Neill and work on climate action planning. They send out a merit aid package. It might include a McKinney Climate Fellowship, a promised fellowship. So then the benefit is that obviously we have now a friend in the school, which we have all along, but they are more willing to contribute financially to our programming. But also we have identified that student an entire year in advance. So we then are going to walk those students through a couple of classes.
that are going to make them better prepared to go out and work in the community. So that's just getting started right now. So that's one way that we're more directly tied to the curriculum.
Thank you. A couple of questions related to student engagement for the St. Louis group. Say a little bit about how you have had success or process or not with engaging students in sustainability between campuses.
I can start. Sure. So this is something that we have dabbled in, but we've recognized as an opportunity. I think for many different reasons, students are now more interested than ever in what's happening at other institutions. And we can provide the institutional continuity so that we can, just like I was talking about earlier with how we can identify administrators that might be to connect with, we can also have a pulse on what the student body is doing, what the who the students leaders are and how they change over time. So again, I can connect the leader of the Student Environmental Coalition with a similar student group on UMSL's campus. They've made some of those connections organically, but we feel like this has a lot of potential for more prolonged and higher impact connections. Do you want to talk about some of the challenges?
Sure. So at my institution, we are a commuter school, and
we want here with the help of the speakers would stand. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So at my institution, we are faced with a challenge of student engagement because we are a commuter school. Students come and then they're take their class and they're ready to go to work or pick up their kids from childcare. So that has always been an issue for us at UMSL. However, I think I found a key to that is paying them. That seems to help a lot. So being able to pay student workers then has allowed me to really kind of build out a program and to identify the students that are most interested in this, because the folks that are willing to take a job, you can see very quickly how interested they are in the actual work once they're there in your office. And doing that, and then also serving as the advisor for one of the student clubs has really helped me tie into the people that are truly engaged. And that's building on those connections, I think, is one that I can send them over to, like, did you know about this organization in town that's doing this? Did you know that over at Washington University, they've got 8 clubs or something, whatever, quite a few more clubs, but they're working on this. And or did you know that the Missouri Botanical Garden is interested in doing some climate action planning of their own, and we just did our greenhouse gas inventory data collection. Maybe you could go help them out as an intern, which is one of our recent successes, that a student of ours, paid for him to go through the University of New Hampshire's training program on greenhouse gas inventorying, and then put those skills to use for another organization in town, because this is an international student who wants to stay in the States and work in this field. So who better to learn from than a local institution, and then another local institution like the Missouri Botanical Garden, which is such a success story. To know that that student and some of his coworkers, his other peers, are then connecting students at Maryville is exciting. So I think some of those challenges are there for sure, but once you find them, you find that gem, man, it's our job to really polish the diamond, I guess, really, when you think about it.
And complement to that question from the St. Louis side, what are the biggest barriers to collaboration and connection and student engagement across this diverse network of institutions?
I mean, I think one of them, because this question actually, and I'll stand, just came up at our last steering committee meeting, was that we actually had interest from one of our groups over in Illinois, who actually had a student group that was interested in how do we start a bike shop, how do we do some of these other bits and pieces, but to drive to here, to actually see what it's like on another campus might be 2 to 3 hours round trip from where they're at. So sometimes if it's something where it's really like, it's better to be there physically, sometimes being across such a broad region can be a little bit of a challenge. I don't know if there's others that you guys have in mind as well.
Yeah, and I think even in close proximity, that getting out of the university bubble can be a challenge. Students have, they typically have, for people who are campuses, they have access to a Metro Pass, which includes a train and bus, and all of our universities have to be pretty well connected by those systems, which is great, but getting slightly beyond that can be a challenge if it's not taken into consideration. And then also you brought up that activities that cost money to go to, like let's meet at a restaurant or a bar or something like that, can be a barrier. So we want to make sure as we're suggesting meetups and that type of thing that they're free, or that there's some sort of support so that it's an equitable endeavor as well.
Thanks. Couple of questions for the Indiana team. Say a little bit about willingness to participate in your offerings from rural communities.
I think Bill and I both have some good context for that.
Well, I'm from a rural community, so I have great interest in that question. But again, I think every rural community knows Indiana University. They follow Hoosier basketball, for example, and they have some respect for the university system. They've seen some of their best students graduate, go to IU, and go somewhere else, which is a problem with rural communities. So they love having people from IU come to their communities and work with them and support them and ask them. This is really a key thing. Ask them what it is that they want to work on. Not here. We've got some researchers who would like to do research on your community. Maybe you don't really care what they're doing the research about, but we want to do it anyway and help you in that way. So I think it's very important for us to ask the rural communities what it is they really need to help with, and then see if we can match up those needs with the right resources. And in this case now with the rural funding hub, how can we match up the grant opportunities with what it is they actually want to do instead of the way the grant is written. So I think that's a key thing with rural communities, to be authentic and to help them with what it is they want to help with.
That was actually my question. Can I just ask a quick follow-up on that?
Yes.
Are you finding that smaller rural communities are interested in the climate farming aspect, whether that's from a carbon perspective or the awareness perspective, or is that most of the cities? I work in living with Washington initiatives and all of the world. So I want to engage students, but just wondering what your experiences in the intersection.
You would think it would be a lot harder than it is. One of the assets that we have in Indiana is a couple of community environmental nonprofits that are activating youth. And so you are seeing high schoolers in rural communities activate their elected officials in their hometowns to take climate action. And so you're getting this grassroots pressure on mayors that haven't had a reason to necessarily understand or dig into the issue. And then you're having some of the climate impacts that we've talked about, some extreme flooding, reduced rainfall, reduced snowpack, I'm sure an issue in Michigan as well. And these factors are starting to come together for mayors saying, well, I can't ignore it anymore, even though I don't necessarily I don't know how much my community supports it. So then IU and really everyone who's involved in the environmental sector in Indiana has learned how to communicate in ways that don't alienate and make room for everyone to participate, like Bill said, in the way that feels comfortable for where their community is at. So there's a lot of customization and there's a lot of care and there's a lot of kind of long cultivation of these community relationships. But we're seeing communities that 5 years ago, I never would have thought would be interested in a climate action plan. Now, my concern with moving towards closer to implementation is, okay, passing the climate action plan maybe got the high schoolers off your back. But now I need you to back that up with some budget and some staff and some implementation on the ground. And that may not be entirely popular with your community members. And so that's the part that we're really having to emphasize with co-benefits, and Bill being able to bring in some money or help access to some resources, I think is going to help with that.
Thank you very much.
Can't ignore it anymore. What a concept. One more specific for the India team and one for the St. Louis team from Cuba, and then we'll take live questions in the room. So say a little bit more about your engagement with the food and farm sectors specifically.
Well, we have, we actually stole some expertise from Purdue who are now at IU. And they're very interested in local food systems and aggregating local food, finding ways to aggregate local food such that you can get it in big systems like Indiana University system, which has all sorts of interesting twists and turns to overcome. But, you know, we have a food studies institute, a food studies program at IU, and they've been very much involved with those outreach efforts and trying to get out in the field and find out where the broken links are and try to fix those broken links. And again, engaging student interns in that process. And then also engaging with our friends at the Purdue Extension. And, you know, they're in every county in Indiana. And if we can collaborate with them on what they're trying to do with food systems, that is very productive for both of us.
I'll just add to that one of our research efforts was to survey Indiana communities to try to understand what they think about climate change. And there was a particular focus on rural communities. So we developed something called the Rural Report out of this Hoosier Life survey. And the Rural Report, I realize agricultural communities are not one-to-one with rural communities. That's important to recognize. But one of the things that I thought was interesting is that first of all, rural communities are not significantly different in terms of believing that climate change is happening than urban communities. And they are feeling worried for public health, their family's health, and they feel blamed and often not a part of the conversation. And I think some of that, some of the researchers finding, especially when they were interviewing folks, the blame, a lot of that seemed to come from the agricultural community and feeling like it was because of agriculture practices, traditional practices, maybe they were being blamed for climate change. So another reason to engage them in this, starting with the question of what are you worried about and what do you want to address in your community?
I'm the one that asked that question, and I'd like to hear from you guys too about this intersection of food quality and public health, because unless we start demanding it, I don't know how it's going to happen, because I've been farming organically for 40 years and operate in the food hub world, family restaurant, store on the farm, lots of different things. And, you know, we've made some progress in our little rural community, but it's so slow. But if people have access and networks established for getting better quality food, and, you know, this blame game, I would say the industrial ag model is partly the blame. And they don't like to, they won't want to listen to it because of the power of fertilizer and chemicals and so on, big ag. I've lived in that world for all my life. So if you could address, how do you get it, those types, better quality food into all your colleges and universities in Missouri?
Sure. So one of the things that the consortium did was partner with the Missouri Coalition for the Environment to look at that farm to university pipeline to see where some of the challenges were. I think they had also been interested in the farm to hospital. So how does that work? How do institutions get their food from more local sources? And that was pretty eye-opening, I think, in the process for my university, getting to understand more about where those particular barriers were and that certification that my catering company requires and how that that's the issue right there. Really is what the whole report boiled down to for me. But it was, and meeting with, you know, the different universities and having that conversation, seeing where other schools were having success and why my institution wasn't, and figuring that out was very valuable. I don't know if you felt the same way or how you thought about that project. But.
Yeah, so I don't think I was directly as involved with that, but I know that anytime you can kind of again see what other people are doing in the system and leverage that is really valuable. And just speaking from WashU and our approach to food, so we lean a lot on our contracts when we write the contract language and also articulating a specific goal of local spend. are kind of the two principal strategies for how we make sure that our third-party contractors are supporting our vision and our goals to tie into those local food systems.
Yeah, but what I remember from a lot of, of course, the certification part, but also just the sheer volume of food that it was required, and it was very hard for some of these smaller local farms that had the correct certification to really guarantee they were going to be able to provide that food long term. And oftentimes when food is most in season is when there is the least demand on a college campus, was sort of what we were running into a lot. So, you know, I think it's at Washington University that there is one smaller caterer that's able to do more of the local foods. I don't remember for sure, but so that some of the smaller campuses might have more capacity to do that because they're just asking for less volume. But really large universities, it's just hard for some of those smaller farms to guarantee they're going to be able to provide exactly the food items they're asking for at exactly the time they're asking for it, and those orders go out, you know, months or weeks in advance, and it's hard to predict for some of these smaller farms. I know there is, you know, like food hub work happening in St. Louis to try and bring more of those food together to provide a more consistent pipeline for those local food sources. But I know at the time we were doing that project, that pipeline just didn't really exist at that moment in time.
And there are some other models for that. Chicago Botanic Garden has participated for 10 years they've led a program called Windy City Harvest, which has been an urban farming program out of a botanical garden. That's not something that we do here in St. Louis, but they've incorporated the national training program Roots of Success into that. They have apprenticeships. They're working on projects to help farmers, the entrepreneurship of urban farming. So there are some models in the Midwest for that kind of sustainable food production support and then distribution. And it was St. Louis University back in the single-digit 2000s that tried to launch a food policy council here in St. Louis. Our Missouri Coalition for the Environment also had an endeavor in that, but never quite got to the critical mass of having that be the kind of endeavor, the kind of movement that you're talking about with assisting municipalities in doing climate evaluations, carbon evaluations, and sustainability planning. One last quick question specifically for the St. Louis group, and then one for both of you, and then we gotta have more general questions. What have you done relative to composting in your institutions?
So we do have composting. The Ag Center is composting your food from this event. It's a challenge. We have one industrial compost facility and vendor, I guess, in our region that is the leading one. So they kind of set the prices, and you get what you get. But it's also a privilege that we have access to something like that. You do pay a premium for it, and there are, you know, limitations on contamination and that sort of thing. And we do have another company that's kind of coming in as well, and hopefully growing a little bit. They take materials to the local facility. So definitely challenges there. I'd be happy to, whoever asks the question, we can connect afterwards about the exciting world of compost.
So for both of the teams, Indiana first and St. Louis second, what are your top ways of identifying measurable results from your work and your major barriers to identifying measurable results?
Well, I think for ERI, we've established numbers of fellows that we wanted to grow those, and we've done that alongside our schools to understand what their interest is, and thinking about the availability of the students to do this kind of work with us. We've established metrics around wanting, you know, to work with proportions of the state. So some of the statistics that you saw on the screen are, 44% of the population in the state now is covered with the greenhouse gas inventory, right? Well, you know, it would be really nice to say we're over 50%, and so moving that mark up as we can, is something that we're trying to do. And what was the second part of the question? Were the barriers?
Barriers to identifying measurable results.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think a lot of it comes back to when we're doing planning work, You know, we can talk about how many, you know, tons of carbon equivalent, right, that are identified in the plans to be reduced, but we can't guarantee that it's going to be reduced, right? Because then a lot of these metrics depend on the community taking action beyond us. And so I think one of the things we're grappling with now with regard to metrics is to think about what is our sustainability plan for these communities where we go and work, and how can we make sure that we're moving them further beyond the plan to implementation.
Yeah, and Bill will have some pretty clear metrics, hopefully, with the funding hub.
Yes.
Yes, and with the funding hub, what we hope to track are the number of contacts for one thing. What do we do with each contact? Each contact might not be part of the grant writing program, but we might be able to direct them to something that would be helpful, whether like a tax credit or a loan program. So we'll track all that. Obviously, we'll track the successful grant proposals, but I think just being able to help as many people that contact us as possible, and not say, oh, sorry, you don't fit our profile, we don't want to talk to you. We want to talk to everybody and see if there's some way we can help them, perhaps well beyond the scope of this proposal. But we think there are ways to convene, do webinars, to have static resources that they can tap into, and then also how to tap into the federal government technical resources that are starting to spin up. So there's lots of opportunities.
Can I add one more thing, which is I think with any organization, you know, we're only 5 years old, right? So I think that when Gabe and I came into the Institute 2 years ago, but the folks who had been there, including Janet McCabe, who is now Deputy Administrator of the EPA, had like massive goals, and they were just super productive people. And I think that one of the things that we are realizing is that we only have so much capacity to give quality experiences to both our students and to these communities, right? And I think that we're at a point where we're realizing quality is more important than quantity, right? Because otherwise you do just potentially have a plan that's sitting on a shelf, right? So, and we don't want that. That's not really move the needle, right? We want to actually get people to it. So,
but to Bill's point, every touch, I mean, like I said, we're playing the long game with these communities.
Yeah.
Every touch, every time that they come to IU and we help them, is shifting the conversation closer to climate implementation.
Yeah.
And it might say, you're not quite ready for this year, but we'd love to keep you in mind for next year. Here are some steps you might want to take to get ready for next year's program.
Really good perspective around these questions. St. Louis, opportunities, barriers to generate measurable results.
I think playing the long game is a great way of looking at it. And I think we're in the process right now of rewriting our campus sustainability action plan. The old one had so many big goals in it that it's still a great document to look at and compare myself to. But also remembering that this is going to continue to take time to get to those goals. And some days the metric over the years has just been, wow, I'm still here. Now looking at some of the other institutions in town that no longer have a sustainability coordinator, that's at least one thing. Like, I'm still employed. But then knowing that the work is going to continue long past me, hopefully, that we are playing this long game. I think and then also knowing that all of those goals that were written into a plan aren't necessarily something that I myself alone can control is important too. That I can set those goals, but really the metrics have to be met as an entire institution. We have to come together to achieve them is important. So I think I struggle with that, thinking about it on a personal level, and perhaps the next session with the resilient activists will tell me more. But then also at the university institution level, what that means and how perhaps we measure things in units that are more likely.
We engage stakeholders across the university in setting metrics. So if, for example, our dining partners are on board with like a 40% local spend, and they think that that's, we have to balance, is it ambitious enough, but is it likely also to be achievable? But if they have buy-in and it's not just like, well, the sustainability, that was their goal and we're just doing the best that we can. We found that there's a lot more readiness to share the work and assign responsibility to meet those goals. So stakeholder engagement is essential in identifying and then also achieving the metrics.
Okay, a couple of questions, I hope, or two from the floor.
I have a question about the hub specifically. So is it just for folks in Indiana? Is it Midwest wide? How are you planning on engaging people? If it's just Indiana, outside of Indiana, if people come to you like from Michigan or Minnesota or Wisconsin, what does that look like?
Well, the pilot year, it's called the Indiana Resilience Funding Hub. So I think we'll concentrate on Indiana needs, but the ultimate goal would be to expand that program beyond our boundaries.
Gotcha. So if people reach out from outside Indiana, you'll be like, maybe next year that'll kind of be
touches that we can use in our data. Say, look, we've got this many people in Indiana that want to take advantage of this, but look at all these people in surrounding states that would like to take advantage of it. We could use some more funding and some more stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
And can I remind everyone, it's eri.iu.edu. With that.
So I have a question for you all. With the massive amount of federal funding heading toward local areas and with some of the barriers to applying for that federal funding, for example, here in St. Louis, it has to be local governments that applies for EPA funding. Are you part of collaborations that are looking at tapping into this giant tsunami of federal bucks? And if so, top tips for doing that or focuses for doing that?
I think grant awareness is something that we're all trying to spin up. And, there's lots of tools out there now, and we're trying to see what's coming down the pipe and when it's coming down the pipe. And I think a critical aspect of this will be matching the grant opportunities and the timing of those grant opportunities with the level of acceptance and level of preparation that communities have, try to match those two things up. And these things are moving very quickly. There's some grants that already passed, some grants have deadlines in March and April. So we're watching that moving window and trying to see what's available there. We've just decided this past week that we need to divide and conquer, and we'll have several people tracking different aspects. Like I might be tracking energy in the built environment. Somebody else might be tracking forestry or water system. So it's such a huge amount of information to process that's our strategy, is to divide and conquer and find the best tools out there that way to do all this information.
And one of the early things we did was look across the state and figure out other organizations that are trying to set up something that's like a hub. There's a group that put together a website that's trying to filter all the information. There are other groups that are trying to pull regional groups together to do it. So as long as we're all connected and talking, we're going to be in a better position than that.
I think the short answer is yes. And so I think everyone is really trying to get their heads around what's available and how to best approach it. My hope is that as speaking on WashU's behalf, that once we feel like we have a handle of what's coming through, that we'll make sure to share that information with our colleagues through these types of avenues. And then I'm also hopeful that the Midwest Climate Consortium will also be one of those kind of networks to be able to share information and raise interests.
One of our faculty experts was trying to figure out how to put together a tool that would go out and search and get all this information, put it in some sort of form that would be manageable. And instead, he found the climate program portal, which is already doing that. It's a piece of software that's pretty incredible. If you haven't seen it yet.
Name of it is what now?
The climate program portal.
It's through America's All In. So if you Google America's All In, and it'll pop up. That's one of the first things that'll pop up when you click on it. You click on the website.
Federal funding right now is really driving a lot of our retrofitting and renovation projects on our campus, and without it, I think our sustainability program would be wouldn't be moving us ahead quite as far. So the way that we're doing campus sustainability action planning right now is taking place in a much different climate because we're flush right now because we've got that influx of funding from our state government. And that would be something that if to speak to the students in the room, grant writing would be a skill that I would recommend if you haven't already considered that. For those that ability or opportunity to gain that expertise. I second that.
Another excellent reference that I found is Second Nature just published a guide to how higher education can take.
I have 30 of those printed in the next session.
It's a wonderful document.
Yeah, I have.
With, Second Nature.
Yeah. Yeah, I have one there in the room.
You know, there's things in there like, you know, it used to be that universities couldn't take advantage of the 30% tax credit. Well, the Treasury has helped solve that problem by offering the same kind of incentive, even if you can't take advantage of the tax credits.
We have a resource. It's called it's Higher Education and IRA Funding. Let me see. The name sometimes like word vomit. We have it all together. I have it printed because I've read it so many times. Higher education or higher ed and climate provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act. So it's on our website, but it's also, I printed 30 of them. So I'll be talking a little bit about it in the next session for the cross-sector collaboration, but I'll be pulling up the Climate Federal Hub as well, just because one thing that's really great about that too is you can go through it and say, oh, I'm a higher education institution, or I'm a city, or I'm a tribal government or something like that. So you can break it down to where you're actually looking at it through the lens of what you need. So that Federal Climate Hub, I think, is going to be really crucial with the IRA, and it's for the Federal Climate Hub looks it looks at the IRA and the IIJA. So it looks through both of those lenses with those bills that we passed.
Thank you. Well, we are at time now. Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Thanks for coming.
I'm sure.